Hi, my name is Ester Lou, and I am a writer and director. Well, I talked about writing for a long time, but I didn't actually do it until I moved to Los Angeles about 4 years ago. And television is what I wanted to do mainly. So I was writing a lot of pilots, I was reading a lot of pilots, and that's all I could do really because I didn't have a job at the time. I thought when I moved from New York it would be easy for me to get a job, but I didn't. So that entire time, all I could do was get up in the morning and write. And I think that's probably when I truly became a writer, when my goal every day was to write something, to complete a scene, to complete the draft, to rewrite a draft. So that's when I became a writer. Professionally speaking, I've been writing for Black Sexy T.V since January of this year, 2015. So that was the start of my professional, official career as a writer. So as a content creator dealing with African American stories, African American actors, African American crew in front of, behind the camera, there are like two main challenges. One is we often don't get the representation we deserve, and then when we do, it's usually not as three-dimensional as we are as a people. So it's very difficult you get excited when you see a show on television or you see a movie that represents like African American stories or it has an African American lead, but at the same time we put a lot of pressure on that one TV show or that one movie to represent all of what it means to be an African American, to be a Black American, and that's a little unfair, but we just get so excited. We want that show, we want that movie to be a huge hit, and we want it to speak to like who we are as a people. But that isn't always the case, so that's a little challenging. And sometimes I think probably the biggest challenge is even when you do see a great television show or a great film, we're not the ones behind the camera, so we're not really in charge of the story and the dialogue. Just recently I watched a show, I'm not going to name any names, but I like the show. It has a Black lead, it has Black actors in it, but there was one scene and I just knew as soon as I heard this actor speak that a person of color did not write it. It didn't sound authentic, it didn't sound real, it didn't sound like anyone I knew. It didn't sound like an argument I've heard before. It's not to say that I know all Black people, but it didn't resonate with me as truth. And I think that's a challenge even when we do get an opportunity to be in front of the camera, behind the camera, we're not there. We're not the ones writing. And so the representation isn't completely full. So we're in an interesting time where there are a lot of television shows that star African American women, and when you look at features, there are opportunities for Black men to be in leading roles, but there's still a lot of work to be done. There's still a lot of progress to be made in front of the camera in terms of the variety of how we're represented, and behind the camera in terms of being the ones to actually tell the stories that are genuine to our culture and our lifestyle. At Black and Sexy TV, I am fortunate enough to be a writer, a co-creator, a director, and maybe one day soon an actor, because Black and Sexy is such a unique and small collective that there's an opportunity to do everything there. So right now I am co-creator of Sexless along with Leah Williams and Numa Perrier, and I'm also a co-creator of Chef Julian, which is a spin-off of Sexless with Dennis Dortch. I also had the opportunity to direct a couple of episodes of Chef Julian this year. That was my directorial debut, which I'm very excited about. And that's basically what I do there I guess that's my main job, but really when we're shooting, it's all hands on deck. It doesn't matter if I wrote the episode or if I'm supposed to be directing it. If somebody needs to do the slate, I'll jump in and do the slate. If somebody needs to do sound, I'll do sound. So those are my titles, but at the end of the day, I do whatever needs to be done to get the content out to the people, because that's the type of close-knit family we are. No one has a lot of ego in terms of what I do or what you do. We're all one family. I've worked at a lot of networks before Black and Sexy TV, but Black and Sexy is definitely the most unique experience I've had. First and foremost, I can text the founder of Black and Sexy. I could never do that when I worked at VH1 or Nickelodeon, Lifetime. I'd never had access to the people at the top the way I have access to the founders of Black and Sexy. And it's mainly because they value what I bring to the table and I trust what they do. So we have an open dialogue and we can talk about stories, we can talk about characters. We don't always agree. We can have a debate, we can have a discussion. So that type of access is different to any other network I've worked at in the past. Another big difference would be that, it's very family oriented. I think I've been in everyone's homes. We've all been in each other's homes. We've shot at different apartments. We've had meetings in someone's living room. It's very family focused, and there are kids around on set sometimes, and sometimes we just tell them to put the headphones on and don't worry about what's happening on set. But it's very family. It's very loving. It's very inclusive, and I guess the most obvious distinction is I'm working with Black people all day. Like, everyone around me is Black. That is not something I've experienced. Even when I worked at MTV, I don't want to date myself, but what was that? Early 2000s, when there was a lot of diversity there, and I had a great experience there, but we were only in certain positions. We weren't necessarily always in the corner offices. It's very different in Black and Sexy. Everywhere I look, top to bottom, there are people who look like me. So that's what makes it probably the most different. Kind of goes back to what I said before about being in control of the voices and the stories that are told from the Black community. Black and Sexy gives content creators an opportunity to take control of how we sound and how we look and how we love and how we fight. Those are things that if you don't know a Black person and you're just watching television, you're looking at a TV show, you're looking at a film, and you're thinking, oh, this is how this community behaves. And so it's really important to be in control of those images and be in control of how we sound. That's why Black and Sexy is so important to the Black community. On another level, it's also important to the independent community outside of race and culture, for them to be able to create a way to monetize web series, which at one point people said could not be done. They found a way to do it. They found a way to create their own distribution, to basically cut out the middleman. And it's such a wonderful environment as a creator, because I can say, oh, Dennis Newman, I have this idea. And they can say, okay, let's think about it. Let's talk about it. And then it can happen. We can start shooting. I don't have to go through so many layers of executives. If it's something that resonates with the brand, it can happen. And that's really important for content creators, to have access to a platform that is open and inclusive and has found a way to monetize what it is that we're doing. So that's very important as well. Two of the shows that I have the pleasure of working on, like I said, I co-created Sexless with Leah and Numa and co-created Chef Julian with Dennis. They're very different they're similar and they're different to what you see in mainstream media. In terms of Sexless, you have 4 unique women, friends, looking for love, but we're not afraid to handle subjects and moments that you may not see in mainstream media. A lot of times mainstream media wants to go for the joke. They want to go for the big dramatic moment. And what we like to do is just go for those small moments between people, when you're with your girls, you're hanging out and you're on the phone. And sometimes those moments aren't captured in mainstream media because you don't, they may not find that interesting, but we know what we find interesting about our relationships and our friendships. So it's different in that way, in that it feels more authentic. We take more time with the characters and the stories and giving them like a full dimension of who they are and what they sound like and what they dress like. So one of the ways that Black and Sexy is different to a mainstream media show is the comments. So for instance, we just had a episode of Chef Julian that actually made the record for comments on VHX, and it just goes to show how engaged our audience is and how involved and invested they are emotionally into the characters and the storyline. And I watch other shows and I follow them on Twitter and, you know, maybe Facebook, and people make a good comment, thumbs up, like the episode. Now that Black and Sexy, these viewers who are the best fans in the world write 5 and 6 paragraphs. They talk to each other, they break down storylines, they hypothesize character, psychological profiles. They go in so deep, and it's not anything I've seen on any other show, on any other network. People may talk about it. Maybe there's The Atlantic will do an article, you know, assessing what happened on Game of Thrones, but these people aren't reporters. This is your everyday viewer, your everyday fan who is so invested that says, I have to talk about this and I have to talk about it with someone else, like right now. The episode just ended, that we have to talk about it right now. And that's something I've never seen in mainstream media. And it's something that we love and we cherish at Black and Sexy, because we love to hear what they're thinking, their theories, their own past experiences, how they relate to it. It's very unique and it's very wonderful to the Black and Sexy community. We have 4 founders, 2 of them are women. They're both writers, actors, directors. So there's a precedent set from the top down that as a woman I can do anything at this company, as long as the story is relevant, as long as it fits the brand, options are open. So that's something that I don't take very lightly. I'm very appreciative of that, because there aren't many, well, there's so many stories about women in Hollywood and the opportunities and the ceiling that they reach, especially if you want to do something like direct. But that's not the case at Black and Sexy, because it's all hands on deck. And if you have the vision for it and you see it, then everyone will support you, everyone will get behind you. Before I started working at the company and when I was just a fan, I just loved that the moments felt so real. I felt a lot of times like I was watching, like I was almost sneaking, watching someone else go through their life. It never felt overly staged or overacted. It felt very real. And I think that's something that Black and Sexy does very well, because one, we pull from our own real life experiences. We are very open in terms of choosing stories that are reflective of who we are. And there's a nice partnership between the creators and the actors, and that goes for men and women, but it's very helpful with women because there's a collaboration there where we can say, well, you know, this is what I wrote on the page, but how do you see this happening? What would you do? Did you have a relationship like that? So the actor is able to bring in some of their own flavor, and that just makes it feel more authentic, more real. Little things like twisting the hair in the bathroom, or the way that you talk to your homegirls, little things like that, an actor is able to say, we give them the freedom to bring some of their own life into it, and that's what helps it make it so real and feel so authentic. And I think that's completely different than, as I referenced earlier, I saw a scene and it was a black woman having an argument with her husband, and I felt nothing in that argument. I did not feel her anger. I did not feel her pain. She said a couple of things that I knew I was supposed to laugh at, but it didn't register to me because it didn't sound like not what even that actor would have said if she were in an argument. It just did not sound real. And it was really frustrating to me because I did have a moment where I was just like, man, if Numa wrote that scene, or Janine or myself, that scene would have been so much better. It's not to throw shade on that writer. It wasn't coming from an authentic place, so it didn't register the same. And that's something that we work really hard at Black and Sexy, where if it doesn't hit us, if we don't feel it, if we don't feel like this could have happened to me or someone else in my world, then that's not something we're going to do. We're not going to push a storyline just because we think it's funny or dramatic. It always has to come from a real place. And I think that registers particularly with the women that you see in front of the camera on Black and Sexy. The sky's the limit working at Black and Sexy, because you can be behind the camera one moment and in front of the camera the next moment. It just didn't make sense for me anymore to just be a writer. I'm a storyteller, and every way I can tell stories, I want to be able to do that. I want to be able to express myself in as many ways as possible. And the reality is that, economically speaking, you want to be able to make a living for yourself in as many ways as possible. And a little while ago, I told myself I did not want a regular job. I could not go back to a regular job. That's just not an option for me. So while I'm writing, I need to expand and also direct. And then I also need to expand and act, because I want to be able to use all my gifts and talents, but at the same time, I want to be able to feed myself off of all my gifts and talents. So I think that's the next step for me in terms of being a storyteller. And I have a novel inside of me. I know it's there. A novel is very daunting, but that's probably the next thing. I don't know when that's going to happen, but that's something that's on my list. I would really love to write a novel with a unique, strong, and when I say strong, I don't mean like the opposite of weak female character, but one that is three-dimensional, one that has a lot of history, one that has a lot of color and a lot of richness. So that's on my to-do list. So when it comes to creating content for people of color and audiences who want to consume that content, it's very tricky, because what we say and what we do informs what Hollywood decides to make. And I don't think we're always aware of how that works. There was an independent film that was supposed to come out last year. I don't want to get into it, but it was starring an actor, and a lot of people felt that this actor should not portray this person. And so people signed a petition, and people were on Twitter, and they're on Facebook. And I was just like yelling at the screen, that's not how this works. By the time you see the announcement, it's happening. The movie's happening. Now, no one may see it. It may not get wide distribution. That's a whole nother story, but it's already happening. And by you talking about it, it doesn't really matter what you say. As long as you're talking about it, they read that as interest and engagement. And by they, I mean like decision makers in Hollywood. That's the same thing with a lot of the TV shows that we see, especially when it comes to reality shows. I've seen people diatribe, thesis, paragraph rants about this reality show that they don't like and why it's bad for black women and blah, 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 and hashtag this, hashtag that. It doesn't matter. You've just put out 2 hashtags that now someone else is going to pick up and another person is going to pick up. So the network just looks at that like, oh, they're interested, it's engaging, people are talking. I don't care if they hate watch it, they're going to watch it. So we have to be, as an audience who wants a full representation of people of color on the screen, we have to be more savvy in how we protest and how we react to what comes out. A lot of it has to do with strategy. We all know we got to go the first weekend. Like, that's something we've adopted. We pretty much know the movie comes out, we want to do well, that first weekend is important. I think on the social media side, we also have to realize that not talking about something is more important than trashing it on social media, because if it trends, if it tracks, if it has a following, it doesn't register negative or positive. They just see, oh, it has a following. So I wish we knew a little bit more about that so that we could be more we could be more strategic and stronger in letting Hollywood know what we're interested in and what we don't want to see. And conversely, what we want to see more of. For any aspiring writer or director, my advice would be to always be writing. I know it sounds so boring and cliche, but it's true. Your number one fear should be, and this is mine, that one day someone will ask you to read your stuff, to see your reel, and you won't have it. So every day you get up to avoid that happening, because you do not want that to happen. They may only ask you once. And even if you are on something that you really love and you're a part of a project that you're really invested in and you're doing a great job, they'll be like, oh, they did such a great job on this. I wonder if they have anything else in their package, in their reel, in their portfolio. And then they'll ask you, well, what else do you have? And if you're like, oh, I've been working all this time on this project, I had an idea, but I haven't written it down. That's a fail. You do not want that to happen, because it's hard and it's time consuming to always be writing, to always be working, to always have a draft. And for me, it's difficult because my parents, God bless them, super supportive. My mom is Caribbean. She's an immigrant. She doesn't really understand how Hollywood works. So she'll say, what happened to the script you wrote last year? And I was like, oh, well, that was a spec script. Well, I thought you said somebody read it. I said, yeah, they read it, but so they're going to make it? Well, no, they're not going to make it. They just read it. Okay, so they're going to buy it from you? No, that's not how this works. But then a couple months later, what are you doing? I'm working on a new script. Well, what happened to the old script? It was old. I had to write a new script. And some people may not get it, and it is tiring, because you're always, until you get to a place where you're doing your own stuff, it's your show, it's your movie that you're directing, you always have to be writing. You always have to be shooting something. It doesn't matter if it's big or small, as long as it's authentic and it's good and it's fresh, meaning it's not the same thing you were touting 3 years ago when you first moved to LA or New York or wherever you are. It's gonna get you further along to your goal. So for me, I don't know where the clubs are in LA. I know coffee shops though, and you should too. Don't worry about, actually you can cut out some of the networking events and the panels. Like, you should only be going to networking events and panels if you already have a couple of scripts in your portfolio and your reel is tight and ready to go. You can stay home and work on that. I actually went to a panel recently where one of the writers said, if you don't have your feature finished, you should not be here. You should go home and leave and finish your feature right now. And a lot of people were laughing, and he was dead serious, because when you're at that place where you are networking with other people who are doing what you want to do, you want to have your stuff ready. You want to be able to say, oh, I can email it to you right now, not a problem. I can print it out. Where's the printer? Right? You want to have it ready. So always be writing, always work on your own stuff, and make that your priority until you are producing that script or shooting that movie. Make that your priority. This has been Ester Lou, giving you the scoop on what it is I do and my experience working with Black Sexy TV for blacksyrupmedia.com. Sometimes you don't know the answer until somebody asks the question. So it was a good experience for me, since this was my first interview for a media outlet. So I hope it did it justice, and I hope you find something inspiring out of it.
It's a wrap.
I hope you do find something useful out of it.